Den där paletten.
So,
But there's no
Den är ganska easy.
there's no
minutes passing on.
Jag tycker de bör ta sån här tid. Liksom. Men generellt
And we continue, please. So one time, one time.
yeah, he'll present it now. That's right.
And I thought you need the tomatoes to silence me. Anyway, so just as an organizational follow-up here, there's some challenges with availability in the second slot on the 17th of February. Does any other group feel inclined to take up that slot and shift with the group that has the issues? Is there any group that doesn't have strong preferences for the slot? Or are you all? Did you all figure out your perfect slot and you don't want to move one bit from
First
it?
week doesn't work. It's the 2 first weeks that don't work. Sorry.
No voluntary shifts? Again, just to repeat this, you may have heard it. But one group, the ones focused on news games, can't do the second week. So the question is, is anyone else willing to shift or swap their position? Second week is okay. I mean, you had still 1 week of dry run and see how it goes before you actually go for it. But it has the advantage that you're done early, if you like. So is any group feels inclined? No, not yet. Also, I posted an issue in the online tracker and see if the remote participants feel that they want to move this. But consider it, else we'll see what we do about this challenge there. Okay, cool. I'll leave it at this for now. Yeah, I'll post it later. And consider it. It's by no means a bad choice, especially if it doesn't conflict with your other obligations, such as writing the report. Okay, where were we? So we're just starting to talk about different theories and experienced health and safety threats. And now we're back to it. And the first theory we want to look at is self-determination theory, because it's really fundamental to many of the serious games you're using. It's important from a pedagogical perspective and how to get people to learn effectively and so on. So it's really important to pay attention and kind of listen to this theory, understand this theory more or less. Point is, I'm not a psychologist or social psychologist, so the best source, of course, always the literature. But I think I get the essence across. So the idea is basically there, in contrast to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which assumes a certain order and their incremental sequential fulfillment. The self-determination theory is quite a bit different, and the idea is that, or the question is rather, how can we stimulate individuals to show the highest level of motivation, and more importantly, intrinsic motivation, right? So motivation that, what's intrinsic motivation? And what's the opposite? You have heard that somewhere, come on, seriously. Yep.
Intrinsic is something that comes from within.
From within, right?
You are naturally motivated to do something.
Yeah.
Whereas extrinsic is the motivation is coming from some other factors which are external to you.
Yeah. Can you give an example?
Maybe there's a healthy, what you can say, if someone wants to join gym, they could be internally motivated to get fit, or the gym posts discount that, okay, there's a X% off,
right,
and that's how they get motivated.
Yeah, so that could be an example, right? So monetary rewards, or discounts or so on, can be a strong trigger for this perspective, yes. Yeah. So another example is genuine, I kind of bring it back to the setting, genuine interest in a topic and learning it. You need this for your master thesis in particular, as opposed to just hoping for a good mark. So that would be the extrinsic motivation. It can work out, but it's tough to pull that off for one semester. So especially if you're alone. But okay, coming back to self-determination theory, and this theory wants to make the point. Okay, what do we need to satisfy to get people to show their true, to unleash their intrinsic motivation and perform the best they can? And again, has the claim of generality should apply to all humans. So it's usually a bit dangerous claims, but fundamentally the idea is that there's three essential things. One of them is the idea of having some sort of autonomy. So people need to feel that they are in control of their activity within the boundaries of what frames you, what defines your activity, your action space. You want to feel that you have the choice to do something, right? You just don't want to feel I have to do the following, because otherwise you are challenged with respect to your autonomy. You feel that you are doing something for someone else, to bring it back to the extrinsic level, and that's quite relevant there. The second one is competence. You want to be comfortable with the choices you make. So if you let me bring it back. Let me bring it back to your student lecture and serious games that you're going to give, right? So in order to unleash the intrinsic motivation, you want to be in a space that makes you feel competent about what you're doing. For you, it could possibly mean that you want to prepare yourself reasonably well, not to be standing in front of the class and what is it about and what do those slides say. So that's kind of a feeling of competence that you necessarily develop. That can be part of training, either via serious games or the education system itself, but of course also with respect to the situation you're putting yourself into. So you want to be competent with respect to what you do. That's why we train people for jobs, so that they're actually quite comfortable in the jobs they're doing and hopefully are highly motivated to do them, right? I mean, we can still pick up the latest tech along the way, and now talking to the Max people in particular, right? So if there's another iteration of WebAssembly coming out, or the next query language and so on, that's something you want to be comfortable learning autonomously. And if you do so, then you'll be likely very highly motivated. But having the skill and competence to actually attain those and relate those skills is important. And the other aspect, in addition to this one, well, if I'm really good at what I'm doing, right? So, and you have the freedom to do freedom to choose what I'm doing, is that enough to have high intrinsic motivation to performing well in the long run? Well, the argument is well, not really. It needs to be reflected in the relationship to others. So it needs to be relevant to others, right? So it's not just you doing it, right? So being in your cage and producing some sort of meaningful outcome with a reasonable level of autonomy within those boundaries, and of course being competent, no doubt, but you want to feel that it matters. And that's one of the other factors they put forth, or the third factor, in fact, they put forth. So it's really about the idea to have sort of interaction with people, especially with respect to subject matter. We see that in you, that you start discussing topics, right, of your master thesis, hopefully your student learning topics, and so on. So that's the need that you want to see. Second of all, just imagine you're giving the student lecture and no one cares. And I promise you will care, because it's part of it. Talking about extrinsic motivation. But the point is, it's relevant to every one of you, right? So if you were just giving a lecture in front of a group of students in algorithm and data structures, guess what? That wouldn't be entirely exciting on your part, and possibly not on their part either, right? So it's important to have the relevance reflected here. So, and the idea is that if you balance all of those ones, and of course there's of course can be variations, but generally if you satisfy all those ones, you're probably in a space that allows you to perform at your best, and hopefully from an intrinsically motivated perspective, right? You don't rely on payment, you don't rely on grades as rewards, you don't rely on social recognition as a reward. All those are extrinsic rewards, right? If you're just doing something out of peer pressure, it's not intrinsic, sorry, right? So it's an extrinsic motivator. Any comments further on this one? No? Right, guess together. So
we'll talk more about the next week.
Yeah, exactly, right? So Runa will pick up on this because it's particularly relevant for pedagogy point of view. And the effect that serious games want to have, we get to that even within the session, hopefully. And the theory that's related to it is the you come across this three-factor theory by McLennan as well. It's quite a bit older, and it kind of has similar factors if you look at it. It has achievement, power, and affiliation as three factors. And you see how fuzzy the space is, right? So, we figured out the most important three factors. There will be no other factors ever, right? And then there's the next one. I was steering you slightly off. Let's try it quite differently. But it's important to realize what the difference between those theories can sometimes be. Even though the factors are very similar, not exactly the same, but similar, McLennan claimed that, he's not alone doing so, but claimed that situationally, or depending on your personality, one of them is the more important one. So it's not so much that you need to satisfy a set of different factors in order to achieve your best. But the argument there is effectively that are you more of an achiever, are you seeking power, or are you more like a socializer, right? Seeking affiliation primarily as part of your lifestyle and preferences, of course. So it's not disputed. So depending on the perspective you take in your game, one or the other theory may actually be more applicable or more relatable to you. Right? And sometimes it's good to look deeper into, okay, what does power actually mean in particular in this context of this theory, and how does that map back to my serious games I'm looking at? So I just wanted to sneak that in as an example how closely aligned theories can be, yet somewhat contradictory. And that's similar to Maslow, of course. Talking about Maslow, there's another theory that has been developed in the context of workplace productivity. So this whole period of Taylorism, basically, and it also sits alongside. I'm not sure if that's 100% reflected in serious games, but it's still relevant to know about this theory again as yet another stratification, and it challenges the Maslow hierarchy as well. And Herzberg did a analysis in a work style setting, also related with respect to intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. And he identified more or less that there are two major factors that determine your motivation, or rather your productivity. On the one hand, certain hygiene factors, minimum requirement you can't compromise on, such as sterile work condition, probably lighting, pay, and aspects like this, right? Toilet breaks, I guess, right? Minimum requirements. And then there are motivational factors, right? So opportunity to lead a group, to lead a team, to have autonomy in your decision making, or in starting new initiatives. That's probably something, that's something that, for example, the modern startup culture jumps on, right? By giving you one day off in a week to be creative, they want to activate your intrinsic motivations to be, involved and innovative with respect to novel ideas. But that will only work under the condition that this is satisfied, right? So in the ideas, then you can play all different combinations. Of course, guess what? If you're paid well and your working conditions are somewhat decent, and you get an opportunity to play football in your breaks and whatever else, then you are most likely highly motivated. Surprise, surprise. If both is low, probably average. But then the combination of them is quite interesting, because that's where it becomes relevant for example, employers, of course, in this context. If you have high levels of hygiene, meaning that your base requirements are satisfied, so your work conditions are okay, your pay is decent, but you have limited motivation because it's a routine-based job, because you don't have any autonomy, well, job becomes a paycheck. So that's a bit of a warning bell, because productivity will be very low. You'll be very comfortable, but not really motivated doing a job. Right? And conversely, you may be highly motivated. You want to work as a game developer, and game developer means you are ending up as a poor person. I mean, that's the predictor is very, very, very clear, very sharp, very strong. Unless you, of course, do kind of mainstream work, or for example, serious games path. But as if you're a classic game developer, the payoff is really not good in terms of your hourly wage. Probably sits around $1 or so in terms of the hours. So if your motivation is high, but the hygiene is low, pay is low, working conditions is low, well, you probably still do your job, but as soon as a better offer comes, you're gone, right? So it's also important for employers. This was kind of the lesson learned, I guess, from this theory. But you see, okay, we have three factors that are super important. We need to satisfy them all at the same time. Then we have three factors, but they can have varying priority. Now we're looking at, actually it's only two factors. But if you look at those theories with a bit of an abstraction, you'll see that this sits very much a lot higher, right? It's not as concrete with respect to what those factors may be in a given context, but still worthwhile knowing about. Maslow, I'm not talking about this, just as a backdrop. It's a classical one that is important. So those were basically motivational theories, or most of them, and they actually really look into what drives you, how do we get the best out of people, what could be motivational factors. There's a hell lot more of those things. I'll show you an overview later, but just to be aware of those. Self-determination is probably quite central to this course and to many serious games. And then you can it can guide you, of course, in your analysis. You can identify, okay, how far do I reflect relatedness? How far do I reflect autonomy, right? And of course, how do I groom competence in a serious game? So the other group of games is about behavioral change. So Runa.
Just to remark on the terms here. So I would prefer calling them models. They use the name theory, and theory. I mean, from physics, we think that theory is something given by nature. So it's undistributable.
That's a law given by nature. Right, but okay.
Yeah, but I mean, theory is based on some of the laws, so they're kind of undisputable. But these theories are more like models. They kind of explain certain aspects, but as all models, they are just simplifications and need to be adapted. So you don't have to assume that these theories are undisputable.
No. Exactly. It's important. I mean, you see they're in part contradictory. So how else would that work? That's right. So it's just the best shots, I guess. And those were historical ones. I suspect in the next few years we see a few new ones coming up again. But they usually pick up some of the ideas and repackage them. So yeah, again, models. Sure. Yeah. Call them models. And we're coming to models. One of them is the Fox-BMAT model. Has largely entered, is particularly in the consulting domain, to develop behavioral change or sustained behavioral change amongst individuals, basically. And it's built on two dimensions. So fundamentally aspects that motivate you in correspondence to your ability. And motivators related to this can be, for example, things like pleasure, of course, right? As expected feedback, anticipation of feedback, of course, increase in social acceptance. So many of the aspects that are covered by the self-determination theory to some extent. And the second aspect is, of course, the ability, which may be often dynamic, but often you're starting at some point. For example, your ability to play imagine your ability to play a game you have played before, right? So it's probably motivation is quite high. It will be easy for you to do because you have played it before. Let's see. Most skillful game I know. What is it? Candy Crush? Huh?
Counter-Strike.
Okay, that's one angle. I was thinking about Candy Crush, but whatever. Okay, well, Counter-Strike. Right. So it doesn't really matter what works for you, but any game you play and that you feel you're sitting in this region, it'll be very, very easy to motivate you to actually play this game right now. Right. The situational model. The idea is there. And the idea is there. If you have a situational combination of corresponding levels of motivation, ability, and some trigger. The game is available, your friends want to play it, whatever else, then you're most likely going for it. Right? So, but you may have conversely the situation that you have low motivation, but still something, the activity is easy to do. What's an example for this? Motivation is moderate, but it's easy to do, so you do it. Or maybe.
Solving math problem, maybe like easy peasy, but sometimes it makes you happy.
Okay, cool. I like the example. I'm stunned, but I take that. I think we have a master's task for you. So that was quick. Thank you very much. The class has a purpose in the end. That's good. Example that is commonly put forth is things like clickbait. Right? You don't really want to know what Prince Harry and Meghan are doing right now, but it's just one click away, so you have to have a look, and then you figure out what they actually do, right? So it's that is kind of a connotation that's oftentimes used, right? Very easy to do, motivation not terribly high, but so what, right? So who cares? No big deal, right? So, and again, if you play your favorite games and so on, that's quite unproblematic. But for example, if you ask anyone else right now to play Counter-Strike and they haven't played it before, they would be in a slightly different situation, right? So they may have a high motivation because the game seems to be in, everyone needs to know that, but your ability may be quite low at this stage, right? So it requires a much, much stronger trigger to actually get you over this threshold and actually playing the game, right? So that's a quite important point. So it's really, the cheapest way of dealing with this is, of course, to navigate along this trigger line, this of course highly abstracted representation. I sense some of you are already identifying the underlying function, of course, but don't go down that route. It's really about a principal model in which you try to optimize for ability and motivators, and then corresponding triggers can jumpstart, which is kind of a good point. But it's sometimes also referred to, for example, in the context of behavioral change. So You want to give up smoking, for example, right? Classic example used in this case. Motivation is very high. Health, cost, whatever. There's heaps of motivations that could make it happen. But if you're a smoker, it's kind of hard to do, right? I mean, no, could be. Right? Could be easy, then it's a no-brainer, and it's solved for you. Right? But if it's hard to do, then you need really strong triggers, social pressure, negative events, external events, such as hearing about someone's disease related to it and so on, to actually push you over the boundary to get it done, right? So, and it'd be equally easy to get you back to change that behavior back, because your motivation may vary, and suddenly the ability of doing it is still hard, so the ability of abstaining it. So conversely, it's very easy to pick it up again. It may quickly allow you to move into the other trigger zone again and have you restart it. So you can use this for those kind of problems as well. So for control of undesirable behaviors by behavior change. So this whole trade-off of motivators and ability is something that's kind of recurrent in many other models as well. There's another concept in the context of learning that you may have come across, and that's the idea of flow. No? Yes, please? Anyone? Else I need to talk? See, that's the reason why it's not a student lecture here, seemingly. I seem to do the talking all the time. Ah, there you go. Good.
Yeah, I think flow is the kind of process when you are like so interacted with your topic that you will forget about everything around.
Yeah.
And you will be kind of really concentrated on what you're doing.
Yeah. Are you sometimes in the flow?
Yeah.
What are the kind of activities?
When you're doing something you like,
yeah.
I think you are mostly in a flow.
Okay.
I don't know. Like
what is it for you? Just for an example.
Soccer, let's say play soccer.
Play soccer.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yep. Okay. Cool. Anyone else? Do you have this kind of? Do you know what he refers to? Flow. Yeah. What would be examples of situations when you are in the flow?
Yeah, also sports.
Mm-hmm. Other activities? Programmers here? Aha.
Programming, when you sort of finally figure out what to do and you just do it.
Exactly. That was the key point, right? So when you was talking about programming, is it in any context?
No.
No? But in which context in your case?
Well, it's when you, for instance, have this particular problem that you want to solve, and you have been working on it, and well, made a amount of time of struggle with it before.
Yeah.
But then you get this spark of inspiration to how to solve it, and then you just get into it, and then you forget all about the time.
Right. Yeah. You forget about time. Suddenly, oops, it's 2 o'clock at night. Like for me
I
yesterday.
haven't had dinner yet.
Sorry?
Yeah, and I haven't had dinner yet. That's also typical. We don't
Yeah, you forget. There you go, Maslow again, right? You forget
it appears.
completely about the physiological needs, actually. I should have gone to the toilet, So, but sure. But so, exactly. So, but I think you're highlighting the key important points there, particularly true for desirable behavior, or behavior that brings you into the flow. So, the theory was developed by Hungarian scientists. Who can pronounce the name? Anyone with somewhat Hungarian background, or I don't know, what's the take on it? So, okay, I go through a model first. We come back to the name afterwards. So fundamentally, the model is about dealing with the trade-off of skill and challenge. And I think Björn highlighted it quite nicely when you said, something, once I figured it out to some extent, right? Because it's a reflection of the skill that you perceive situationally, right? So you say, first of all, I have a skill level in terms of programming language. You're probably not doing whatever you want to do in WebAssembly or Haskell or a language you wouldn't know yet, as opposed to a language you're comfortable with, depending on what that would be. But then it's also the challenge level associated with, right, with this, right? So if you have the situation that you both have the skill level and the challenge, that of course is surmountable, manageable, then the idea is that you get into the situation of the flow, where you kind of endlessly progress and forget about your environment and so on, and are supposedly incredibly productive. There are some studies that make the counterclaim that people in flow may also be slightly too productive because they can't recall what they did in one next day. But that's the optimal idea. Conversely, if you're in a situation where your challenge level is quite high, but your skill level in doing so is quite low. You're entering a potentially a process of anxiety. You know, what would be an example of this stage? Anxiety. You all had it.
The deadline is approaching and we are not able to complete the project.
Perfect. And why are you able to complete the project?
Because we do not have the required skill.
Yeah. So yeah.
We do not have
Exactly. I mean, absolutely, right? Assessment situation, exams, classic, right? You're unprepared going to exam. Good luck, right? So that's that situation here. You will not entirely productive. You will not enjoy. You will not forget about time in the exam, I believe. Be very much aware about time, for example, right? So that's good. And so that would be a challenge level high. Conversely, I mean, it can also be the opposite, where you have a situation that your skill level is low, but similarly, the challenge is simply not there, right? So this could be a classical lecture you're really not keen in, so that you don't really care about, and something you may have heard about already. But your skill level is low, so you don't really know too much about it, but you're not interested in the topic. Again, that's, for example, presenting something to a crowd that is unrelated. If I talk, for example, again about serious games in the introduction to programming course that may be inherently uninteresting and most likely they end up in this apathic state that they really don't care about it.
Or in a typical routine job. I mean, if
Yeah.
you need to gather data for your experiment and you just need to, let's say,
But the skill
export some data and
Yeah.
do kind of massive
Yeah.
data crunching or something.
Exactly. I mean, this example can navigate all along here, though, right? So because you can also be somewhat skilled, but actually it's totally not challenging you the task because you're very comfortable with statistical testing and so on. But they say, no, please clean the data. Like an internship could be a classical example for being somewhere in this range. Sometimes that's a good point. Yes. So that's the point. So I'll give you an example of a anxiety stage. One situation that puts me in anxiety trying to pronounce that name, right? My skill level is very, very low. The challenge is very high. And voila, so I'm not able to do it anyway. So, but there was a comment? No. Can anyone pronounce the name in the meantime? You had about 5 minutes to train.
No, but is it anxiety or frustration?
I know some Russian. I can read it in a Russian way. Like, I don't know. It's Sixent Mihaly.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think we settled on that. Mihaly, yeah.
Sixth Mihaly.
Sixth Mihaly.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We agree on this. Sounds good. Mihaly, Sixth Mihaly. Sure. Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's quite important insight. So it's important to be referenced. We'll not ask you about this in the exam, but we'll ask you perhaps about the idea of what's the idea of flow, being in the flow, in the zone. People say that as well, or getting the groove sometimes there as well. But particularly common amongst developers for good and for bad.
I think it's much more anxiety than frustration. So, I mean, if somebody asks you to go to a big venue with 10,000 in the audience and you're going to sing an opera, I'm quite sure that you're going to be anxious. You're not going to be frustrated. You're going to be anxious.
True. Yeah. Not sure how I'm not sure which dimension we are missing to represent frustration there. I don't know. So I just don't know. So interesting. Challenge and flow. So it kind of relates to this trade-off between skill and challenge, right? But you see, I mean, if you now reflect anymore.
How about fear? Is there any fear here?
Yeah, that's right. So isn't that this correspond? Doesn't it to some extent represent fear, right? This correspondence of.
Well, I guess consequence.
Sorry.
Consequence.
Again.
A consequence. So, like, if something goes wrong, you're
Right.
scared of it going wrong. If
Right.
there's low consequence of something happening,
Right.
then it doesn't really matter. You're going to be in the bottom corner anyway.
Yeah. So the pointer towards consequences, right? For not performing well, right? That's right. So fear out of consequences to be. So that's often in the exam setting, but also in the social setting. So it's quite be aware what does it mean individually. It may also just be a loss in status, right? So if you are talking amongst your peers, again, your pressure situation, talking to your peers here, you want to appear competent as well, of course, and otherwise you will have a situation of anxiety that you're facing. So does someone see the relationship to serious games already? Yeah, please.
yeah, as a designer, if you want to get the players into a certain direction in this graph, so probably like anxiety and apathy is not really pleasant to achieve. So, and I think that like the right side or maybe even the middle is more achievable. Not even achievable, but more you want to achieve that. I think relaxation can be quite nice if that is the goal that you want to achieve with the game.
Very nice, yeah.
But also getting somebody in a flow when they are playing that can also be very, very wanted.
Yeah, that's you make a good point there. You don't necessarily need to force it, right? So perhaps you don't need flow, right? So perhaps you actually want relaxation if that's the purpose of your game. So probably optimize against this, right? Do something that the person is skilled in, that's not that particularly challenging, but that makes the person probably feel good about themselves to some extent. That can be relaxation. So you still have the pleasure element here and there. But perhaps it's not as creative as you would aspire to be, or more challenging as you would see it for the other levels there. That's a good point. So another aspect related to serious games. You alluded to it already, but see if you what's the important aspect there in order to operationalize the game meaningfully? Can we have one game for everyone?
No, I don't think so. I believe these all levels are somehow involved in each game. Because, for example, like you just start playing a game at the start, it would you would have a low skill level, but so the challenge would be high. So as the time passes, the skill level would increase. The challenge would become like easier, but moving on to the next stage, skill level would be higher as well as the challenge. So all these stages are somehow involved in one game. Like in all the games, these are involved.
The essential point you're making there, that's right. It's the dynamic thing, whatever. Native speakers, please. Dynamicity, there, right? Roughly, come on, whatever. So the thing is changing over time, right? So we got it. So and the idea is to correspond both to the player skill, right? So in a conventional game, of course, would be build up of skill because you have a novel game, novel controls, novel environment. You need to get an intuitive feel about how you interact with the world and so on. And then you kind of ramp it up over the upcoming levels, right? So in serious games, it's similar there, right? So you need to figure out where people actually are, right? So, I mean, are they skilled in a certain thing or low skilled? For example, you're doing mathematical puzzles, right? Education games, right? So where's the player in the first place? You probably want to figure that out first before starting with inherently high or challenging tasks, because then you put them in an anxiety mode. And that's not the time when you pick up this thing again, right? So that's one. It's one of the challenges in serious games that you assess, especially if you look at the serious side, especially from a learning perspective, to get this right initially. And you can earn a side of caution a bit here, I guess, to rather be too easy and too hard. But you definitely don't want to challenge, people initially, so you don't want to play the game. Similar to video games, they're really, really hard in the first level. People will give up and never revisit the game again, right? So. It's quite relevant. What are the mechanics you could imply to kind of manage this interaction? So you said explicitly you want to navigate the player into the right spot. How do you manage this, like using game mechanics? What would be game mechanics or mechanisms to do that? Please.
Like a tutorial or an introduction stage. Hopefully that's optional. It's always totally frustrating if you have to play it over again.
Perfect. Right.
But there you can throw the player in like a variety of different settings and just assess how well he handles certain aspects of the game.
Perfect, right? So that's really short tutorials. Oh, we're showing you how to drive a car in this game, kind of thing, right? So, and then first of all, it allows you to assess the person's skill, but also the person should be able to skip it, right? If they feel competent in this area as well. And by assessing the response to this tutorial, you can figure out where they sit here most likely, right? At least you can try to figure it out. You assume. You need to test it, right? So you need to take 5 people or more. 5 is not good sample size. but it's a baseline to get started and assess where people actually sit before then actually deciding, okay, what's the corresponding challenge level I can expose them to, right? So that's an important one. Of course, playtesting is the key. I mean, the old-fashioned way is to have people actually choose explicitly a difficulty. You know, easy, medium, hard. That's like the no-brainer, but they may not just get it right with respect to a particular game, right? I mean, this was the conventional pathway early on anyway, but nowadays I think it's a bit more adaptiveness involved, and we're able to, so it's not really hard. Okay, that should be enough about the flow idea, but I think that's the concept you want to bear in mind beyond this course. It's not just, you know, for our purpose here, but I think it's quite neat to be able to navigate this idea of a trade-off between skill and challenge level. Okay, so now I put you into what, give me a second. Yes, anxiety mode. That's the one, yes. So I want to run you through one of the more extensive models that are out there. Again, nothing to learn by heart, but just to understand how people approach this, the process aspects more specifically. The previous models were quite simple, B-max models, so motivation, ability, and triggers. The flow model is of course also quite accessible and correlates quite nicely, but this one is really builds on an extensive series of models actually from the area of social psychology, and has inspired to a considerable extent modeling of agency in artificial intelligence and multi-agent systems, right? So they have been driven. And what they did is basically, I mean, again, as social psychology, I'm saying that it tries to operationalize our functioning more comprehensively. So this is one of the more entrenched models. And what's the basic idea? Well, how can we predict an individual's behavior, right? So how can we ensure that an individual, or identify a decision-making process that drives an individual to actually take a certain behavior? And the assumption is basically there that the individual has, of course, certain preferences that are innate, right? So, you know, things the person likes, the age the person has, the demographic it falls into, and so on, social relationship it has, and of course the situational information that is available, right? So it can operate on. And the idea is then that it forms three kinds of beliefs, and one of them is the behavioral belief. That is basically, I mean, I would reduce it to experiential learning in the sense that I want to try a new behavior. Let's imagine you want to learn to drive a car. You haven't driven a car before, right? So you may have limited experience, but you may have observational, limited experience. So what do you do? Well, you probably join a driving school, and hopefully someone takes you on a ride, so you have a first-hand experience about what it actually does, right? What's the situation in which I drive a car? What's the action I perform? How do I interact with this vehicle? What's the outcome? What are the risks, and so on? So you get a more realistic assessment of behavior and can develop some sort of balance towards that. Oh, that's a good feeling. I like doing this. Oh, I hate doing this, right? I hate flying, for example, right? So you need to have done it before you develop some sort of balance or preference for or against it. So in the case of driving car, that would be, you probably need to experience it, I guess. So that's the personal dimension. Then there's the second one, the normative dimension. That is, what do other people do with due respect? Are all my peers joining driving school in order to learn driving? That could be a strong influence factor, I guess. Right? If no one were to go there, well, then it's probably far less likely that you would be interested in it, right? So, but it then boils down again to your personal background. How far are you inclined to follow, for example, or be motivated by social influence, right? Again, there's a cultural component there, but it's also very much a group-specific component there. If it's peers, you're much more likely to follow, as opposed to if it's your parents telling you, right? So that's quite important. And there's different forms of norms, just putting them out there, just for the sake of it. So we differentiate between descriptive and injunctive norms. Description norms is pretty much conventions. For example, you look out there, say, yeah, people actually drive. Cool, right? So you observe the reality, conventions, right? It's nothing there. Injunctive norms is saying somebody coming to you, hey, you actually have to drive, right? So there's a deontic, there's a obligation, prescription associated with this. It's not just observing the world, but social influence exerted upon you. And you may be, to varying extent, susceptible to one of those, right? Perhaps you're just seeing what's out there, I want to do the same, as opposed to I'm doing it when I'm told to, right? So this is the two different dimensions that are actually modeled here. So we have individual behavior, we have socially normative behavior, socio-institutional behavior, if you like. And the last part is then, well, can I actually do it? I don't know, right? So do I have the ability to do it? Do I feel personally capable of doing this? Do I have the confidence, rather, to actually do it? Do I feel comfortable sitting in a car and steering it independently in traffic, which may be a completely new experience to that person? Based on that, it gives you a nudge, yeah, I'm going to do it, or I may not going to do it, right? So you have a perceived behavioral control that usually reflects the capacity and, of course, the competence that you ascribe yourself. Again, you see the link to some of the other models we have seen before. So if all those three factors are in favor of the action that you're observing, then that's the idea, will correspond to an intention. So you're actually going to a driving school and want to do that. You want to drive. It's over. I'm not waiting anymore. I have to do this. And generally, intentions are a good predictor for actual behavior. That's very likely that you can actually do it, unless, of course, you can't do it. You actually figure out, oh, I overestimated my skills, right? That's the problem in boys, apparently. Right? So, sure, I can drive, no problem. And then the problem occurs, and that means your behavior has been revised to some extent. Most likely, however, your beliefs about your own ability are revised and hopefully adjusted to the core beliefs. And of course, doing the behavior again feeds back into the exponential cycle, right? You get more experience and you grow as a, I guess, driver, right? So that's why many people say you only learn driving once you have done driving school, right? So that's because of that feedback cycle. Okay, this was just to scale you a bit, because those models can be exhaustive. I mean, this was super brief rundown anyway, because each of those categories has their own discipline behind it, right? So different areas. In case anyone wants to do research in that area, come to me, but not the other ones. So, but I just wanted to give you an overview of a model that's a bit more exhaustive. And if you want to model artificial agents, for example, right, that behave as non-player characters, that may be a model to look at, for example, right? Where it's no longer necessarily about human only, but also about artificial entities. But of course, you can borrow or look at some of the different aspects: individual, social, and ability. Good. What did we learn today? I mean, I learned that I have way too many slides again, because I still have half my slides left. But what did you learn? If there's one thing you learned, okay.
Different ways to model motivation.
Yeah, that's right. So model motivation, yeah, that's yeah. And from the other side, yeah. Continue. Sorry.
Well, there wasn't much more than that. If you want to compile it more, but it's like the way to describe motivation have been evolving.
Yep.
Ever more.
So remind me, what topics are you doing?
I am doing training.
All right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. It applies to all of them. But where's the great game analysis group? You're not one of them. You're a representative. Thank you very much for being here. But this will affect you, of course, directly. Looking at, which kind of triggers or motivations or aspects this game seeks to evoke, right? So I unfortunately don't have the time to get into some specific more examples. But for example, if a game is really more on the social side, trying to elicit interaction, perhaps even mediated via Facebook as a Facebook game, if you like, then you better be strongly influenced here in order to motivate your behavior, for example, right? So you can use those theories to analyze existing games and see if you can categorize them either with, oh, they could have used this theory because they have those components in the game, as opposed to see what they could have done better in the game design. And of course, as you said, model yourself, right? Create a new game where you see things happening. Now they have kind of a repository of different approaches, some more detailed, some on the process side, some more on the motivational side that you can use it. But the main thing I want to get out of this, apart from thinking about those approaches, is really, well, there is no one-size-fits-all approach, right? So in serious games in particular, you need to think about the segmentation, I think, of your target audience for serious games, if you develop them yourself, or if you're analyzing them, look at them, what's the target audience actually, right? Don't just say, oh, there's people that want to learn maths. Well, it's probably individuals between a certain age range, perhaps even gender, because they use certain aesthetics, or so that's something you want to apply. as well. So, and the other aspect that is important as well, that of course the people matter and their preferences, but also situation matters, right? Models that assume a static set of preferences, so if you always assume that all of that is of equal importance at all time, you're kind of on a lost cause already, right? Because you need to know what is the game played in, what is it relative to. Sometimes health games are played in response to a tragic life event, right? Rehabilitation games, for example, right? So suddenly it's really about, the motivations are quite different and may not really be at all normative anymore because no one else has the same injury as I have, but nevertheless, I have this motivation in order to, gain back my skill set or physical integrity, for example, right? So it's quite important to realize. So and that's what I encourage you to do when you look at games, in particular from a perspective apart from the mechanics and so on. But what motivational principles do they evoke, if any, to get you, right? To get you, in a sense, to get you to play the game. And I mentioned before the threat I wanted to put out there. There's a large number of theories, right? This is I just picked, not randomly, systematically, but nevertheless a subset of them. If you were to do a systematic literature review, that would take slightly longer than a lecture. But there's an arbitrary number, not arbitrary, a large number of them out there. So feel open. If you feel like, hang on, I heard about this theory, or a paper makes explicit reference to a theory, have a look at it, right? So, okay, how does it relate? But now you have a bit of a backdrop already of some theoretical frameworks that can relate, right? So the ones we discussed right now are actually here. We have hierarchy of needs, Herzberg, McClelland. Yeah, so we talked about those ones. We talked about Skinner's reinforcement in the last set implicitly. It's also a theory that sits on the process side of it. Bandura's self-efficiency, that relates to the last model, it's not the same one. And so on. So there are an arbitrary number of different theories. That's by no means exhaustive, but just to give you a feel that look at it from different perspectives. Okay, so sad. I want to talk about player types, but I'm not getting there, unfortunately. So that's slightly unexciting. But I think we leave it at this. Otherwise, we exhaust your. Hang on. Which zone are you guys in now? Probably that, right? Most of the time, hopefully. Yes. So you need to work on this. Let's hope that that's why I make the student session slightly more interactive, of course, because it's not just dissemination of knowledge or whatever content, but hopefully also discussion around it. Secondly, you'll be more, and that's not on you, but be more prepared about the content as well, because you know the papers and the aspects we discussed already, right? So that's the advantage you will have in those settings. So it will be slightly different. But thank you in any case for your attention. I'll send around the issue related to the time slots if anyone wants to shift after discussion with the group, or perhaps some of the remote participants that are not here, so we can fill a slot evenly. And next week you hear more about pedagogy, I believe, so learning more general. And then after that it's on you to a certain extent to kind of shape and define the course. So again, just an encouragement, keep an eye on your schedule and start perhaps looking at it early, because sometimes it takes time to do some research, right? So, but if you have a question, please let us know, of course. And yeah, let's go from here and continue next week.